This is Anarchast. Hey freedom fighters, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have from Phoenix, Arizona, Marc Stevens coming in. He's written many different things, and including he wrote a book called Adventures in Legal Land in 2002. He just recently wrote a book called Government Indicted. He's the host of the No State Project radio show, and he generally tries to help people stay out of jail and stop being extorted from the government in general. We'll let him talk a lot more about that as we go on, but the first thing we got to do, Marc, is check your street cred. How did you become an anarchist?
Well, spending a lot of time in court kind of helped with that, and seeing the beast from within. I just, to make it quick, I couldn't resolve the conflicts in my head, because I always knew, well, look, we're all anarchists. Some of us just haven't, a lot of us just haven't realized it yet. And we hold these contradictory ideas in our head that for us, it's wrong to force people to give us money. But if we put on a badge, carry a gun, and call ourselves the government, then all of a sudden it's okay. And I just couldn't resolve that. And one of the things, too, that also helped was the fact that a friend of mine, being the background that I came from was, libertarian and, kind of Republican in certain areas. I was against the United Nations. And so he said, well, how could you be against the United Nations but before the United States Constitution? Doesn't the United States Constitution do the same thing with the states? And I couldn't resolve it. So that, together with Lysander Spooner, really kind of pushed things over the edge for me. And, it was realizing through the research and going into court that they say that a citizen is a member of the body politic owing a duty of allegiance in return for duty of protection. And what I found out from going to court was that government of any size, local, state, federal, doesn't matter, even foreign, Canada, Australia, whatnot, have no duty whatsoever to protect anybody. So if the only thing that made you a citizen was the allegiance and protection, and that those are reciprocal obligations, if there's no duty to protect you, it deals off. And so I was applying that information in the courts and having a lot of success getting things thrown out. And then I stumbled upon Lysander Spooner. Just a friend of mine had it. It was I still have it here somewhere. It's a hard copy. Hey, this is back in the late 90s. It wasn't just, hey, go get a PDF, And so I started reading Lysander Spooner, and that just blew my mind. So the opening, of no treason. The Constitution has no inherent authority at all. If it has any authority, it's only as a contract, and it doesn't even purport to be a contract. And if we assume it was, and of course the rest is history, but that's really what did it. It was being consistent with the fact that a core basic principle of mine, what I teach my children too, is that it's wrong to initiate force and violence.
Yep.
And that's pretty much it. It's just, and applying that to everybody else. I mean, I had a police lieutenant a number of weeks ago after I was stalked by Mesa PD, and I said, look, do you agree? He wanted to know, well, what laws do you live by? Because he thought I was an anarchist. Well, it's very simple, and I think you agree with it, Lieutenant. I believe it's wrong to initiate force and to threaten force against other people. He says, well, I agree with that. I said, well, exactly, because you're an anarchist too. But why does that principle, why do you not apply it when you go on the job?
What did he say?
Well, he said that he tried to make the case that they are not aggressive on the job. I said, excuse me? Excuse me? I said, a basic traffic stop is an act of aggression. And this kind of torqued him a bit. What are you talking about, an act of aggression? Most people, there's no violence whatsoever. Aggression doesn't have to be straight covert violence or overt violence. Aggression has to do with the threat of violence. I said, why do people stop their car? Right? The lights go on, and people know there's a force continuum. And then he didn't want to admit it. But he admitted that it was correct and tried to minimize, well, the overwhelming majority of routine traffic stops. Oh, come on. It doesn't matter. I can walk into, so I said, one of the things I can walk into 15 banks with a machine gun. I don't have to ever fire a bullet. Am I still a violent criminal if I rob the bank? Well, you're not trying.
Well, that's against the law.
Yeah, well, that was one of the things that got me in trouble. I was stalked by Mesa PD because I questioned them. I went in as a journalist. I said, yeah, I had my shirt, not this shirt, but I had the shirt with the big Anarchy A on it from my book. And on the back of the shirt has like this symbol. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I can see it. Yep.
So that's on the back. So it's clear that I'm an anarchist. I think so anyway. And so they thought that I was a threat to officer safety and that I was trying to case the joint to blow it up because I asked them if they had any proof that their laws applied to me.
Yeah, that's an interesting place to do it, too, with Sheriff Joe being in that area. He's one of the most dangerous gang members in the U.S.
Yeah, well, I have been to Joe's dungeon on the Madison Street dungeon a few times on, routine traffic stops, and I can tell you that it's not a fun place to be. And I was happy to get the hell out. I spent 12 hours there one time. They thought they were doing me, they were punishing me by. Remember, this is not jail. It's a kind of a holding dungeon, and so they thought it was a punishment to put me in this glass room by myself. People in here with people accused of rape and murder. Yeah, get me the hell out of here.
What did you do on that occasion? 20 miles an hour over the speed limit or something?
No, I was kind of an idealist back then there, Jeff. Well, I didn't have a driver's license and I didn't have a vehicle license tag, so I was out traveling around or driving. And
yeah, you didn't have permission.
I didn't have permission from the man, and they decided they were going to teach me a lesson. And it kind of took to a small degree. It's too dangerous, as you mentioned, Joe Arpaio's people. It's just too dangerous. My activism, yeah, I know there's danger involved, of course, but I'm not going to, on the side of the street with a 5-year-old with a gun. Yeah, that's not the best way to do it. So I may not pay all their taxes, but the vehicle license tax, yeah, that's. Don't invite them into your. I would rather do it at if I have to fight them, do it on the phone here in the fortified compound, or if I'm in court, they're less likely to unholster the gun.
Less likely, but still possible. So how do you end up in court so much? I was under this impression that you have to be a lawyer to represent somebody in court, or what exactly do you do to help people?
Well, most of what I do, back then, like when I spent time with Joe and his people. I was actually, because I wasn't doing a radio show, I didn't have the books or anything like that. I was just helping people because I learned a bit about court on my own, and some friends had heard, and I had helped somebody. He was a friend of mine's child. Well, he was 17. I mean, I can say that now. He's a child. I helped him get something thrown out at the Gilbert Justice Court. It was the South Mesa Justice Court. And something strange happened because they handed me a wad of cash. And I was like, no, please, you saved us like $2,000. And that's when I started realizing, hey, maybe, not that I got into it to do that, but here I can be an activist and actually, support my family and do what I believe is helping people. So, and you fast forward now, 15 years later, and I've helped thousands of people. Where in and out of court with me, most of it without me, but they've been able to get probably I don't know. I've never added it up. I would imagine that I've helped cost the government $1 million or more dollars that they were trying to get from people in traffic alone. But you're right. There's rules of court and laws that you have to be an attorney to be able to speak for somebody in court. However, it is ultimately up to the judge. So. There's a rule that the judge can waive any rule in the interest of justice. So if a rule of court gets in the way of actually hearing the issues, then they just waive it, which is why I've been able to go into court so many times and actually help people.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that was even possible. And the fact that you've been doing it so much and been so successful is great. Is there... could other people be doing stuff like this as sort of a thing that they do? Do you actually charge people for this, or do you do it and then if they're so happy they just give you some money afterwards, or how does it work?
The way it is, people just, I encourage if like a donation to throw the money there, I help most. I do a 3-hour radio show every Saturday, and that's basically, people who don't have the money, so that we do that. But that it benefits so many other people that are listening. There are people that have just listened to the show, bought the book, or didn't even buy the book. They got it because I don't believe in intellectual property whatsoever. And based on what they learned from the show and from the website, they were able to go and get a ticket thrown out. And a lot of times they'll throw something. But to me, as long as I'm able to keep the roof over our head and keep, because I'm a fairly simple guy, and I'm happy. As long as I can raise my children, we're good. And the thing is, with like a gift economy type of thing, people see the value in what you're providing, and they take care of you. If they don't, they don't. But that's, it's a voluntary thing, and I do appreciate. And Bitcoin has certainly helped in that regard too.
That's great. Well, what would you give people, just general advice, the most obvious thing you see in courts that they could easily do to get out of these situations?
Well, I break it down very simply in the book, and I give a lot of real-life examples, and all the names are real, and I even give contact information. So if people doubt that what I'm doing is not true, like even on my website, the marcstevens.net, I've got tons of phone calls that I've made with these bureaucrats. I mean, I've spoken with the Attorney General's office in Toronto. I've done it in Australia and England, and then I had a law professor in British Columbia, Mr. Blum, where I give examples where even a law professor can't answer these questions. So it's just a matter of taking the argument someone's using against you. And their main argument is if you're physically in British Columbia, then the laws of Canada apply to you. They'll all agree to that. Oh, yeah, Mark, of course. If I'm physically in Arizona, then Joe Arpaio's guys think that they have free reign to tase me, beat me, kill me, molest me, and do whatever they want. They actually believe that. That's just the basic operating presumption of these people called government. And I get all that agreement. So I believe in taking their arguments and just asking them, going through the trivium, just basic, grammar, logic, and grammar, logic, rhetoric. And I believe in asking questions like the Socratic method, that you have who, what, where, when, why, and then, of course, how. And so I'm asking them these who, what, where, when, why, and how questions regarding the arguments that they're using. So that's really the first step, which I've never gotten any disagreement with someone, well, you're an idiot. What the hell's wrong with you? Even the most hardened critics will agree that, well, yeah, that's true. And they'll also agree to the second part. There are no sacred cows. If someone is presenting you with an argument, then it's fair game, especially when they're trying to change the course of your life, then it's fair game. Every opinion, every argument that they're using to support their position is subject to collateral attack or to questioning. And that's usually, and so the third one, of course, is where all that's where we usually get the disconnect with the attorneys and all the so-called critics and experts. I don't believe that we should back away from the operating presumption that all governments have, whether it's China, it doesn't matter. They all go under the same one. If you're physically in area X, then our laws apply to you, and we have jurisdiction over you. And the critics and attorneys and whatnot, that's, even though they agree, they'll say, Jeff, or Mark, of course there shouldn't be any say. You should challenge every single, yeah, they agree to that. But when you bring that one up, that's when and they'll give you this garbage. Well, Mark, it's a given. No, it's an element of the crime. It's supposed to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Your own due process rules say it's not supposed to be arbitrary. You have to have witnesses and you have to have evidence. Because you're certainly not going to allow me, some schmuck from Long Island, to raise an argument admittedly with no evidence and of course no witnesses.
And just say it's a given.
Yeah, like I say, yeah. It's because I said so. I've actually had people say, and on the website, that the laws apply because they say so. And you point out, you do know that's circular logic. That's not actually evidence. So I had one here in Phoenix say, well, yeah, it's circular, but it still applies. Why? Why? So that really is all it is. And it's just the main thing is we're not taking a sacred cow. We're not allowing the prosecution's main arguments to go unchallenged.
So you challenge them, but then they basically just don't listen to you, right?
No, not necessarily. You see, you have a couple things that are going on in court. You can raise issues of law, which most lawyers do. And some of them may be true. But if you have a politically unsound issue of law, and you had mentioned, I think it was Mark Victor you were actually talking about. Now, Mark Victor may bring, we'll use it as an example because he's very firm in the drug war. And so I agree with him. It's absolutely sound when he brings an argument, a legal argument, against the drug war. He's absolutely correct. I support him 100% there. The problem is it's not politically, it doesn't fall in line with the current politics. So the judge can just say, that's your interpretation, or I'm going to, he doesn't have to accept it. And Mark's burden, or anyone's burden, when you raise an issue of law, it's one of the highest legal standards to overcome, as opposed to just bringing an issue of fact, which you have a minimal issue as far as your burden of proof. So if the judge ignores an issue of fact, then on appeal, which they do all the time, I'm not saying they don't, but my burden on appeal is just to show the judge got it wrong. I don't have to shock the conscience of the reviewing court, which you're an anarchist. How do you shock the conscience of a psychopath? It's not a burden of proof that I want to take on, and it's been easier for me and for thousands of other people. So that's one of the things, though, is the work that I did here in Phoenix has been replicated all over the U.S. by other people.
Great. It's
been replicated all over Canada, every single province except for maybe Nova Scotia and Labrador, and I should know that one. My family's from there.
New Brunswick.
Not New Brunswick. It's
Newfoundland.
Newfoundland, that's it. We've also had it replicated in Europe, and it's been replicated many times in Australia and New Zealand. So it's a very sound, scientific, rational way to do it. You just have to, and of course it's predictable like science. It's scientifically predictable, and we've been able to replicate the results. The problem comes in that people can't get past that there's no evidence that their laws apply to anybody. And it's so outlandish to someone who's even an anarchist, where they're like, but Mark, you're in Phoenix. How come the laws don't apply to you? Well, there's no evidence. But do you have any evidence? So they'll say, actually, anarchists have said this to me. Yeah, but what evidence do you have that they don't apply to you? No, that's not how it works. The one who makes the accusation bears the burden of proof. I mean, I can show it, but I don't have that burden.
So is this related to this free man on the land thing? It sounds similar to me. Is that what this is, or is it a different style?
No, this is evidence-based. This is something that's replicatable. This is something where especially since I'm coming from it from my standpoint as an anarchist, and I believe that to a very large degree that has not clouded my judgment. I'm just trying to do my best to look at the data. So the data tells me I've got people over here forcing me to give the money. That's provable. There's no debate as to whether that government is just men and women forcing other people to give the money. Everything else is just to kind of cover that up, right? The laws, the Constitution, due process. Or you're forcing me to give you money. And so I don't accept that there has ever been or ever will be an actual government in actual states. They're provably false. I mean, unlike the concept of God, I can actually prove in a few moments there is no government, there are no states, there are no citizens. The freemen and the sovereign citizen people are they're very similar, and they hold that there can be a legitimate government. And I just don't accept that. It's just provably false.
I see. Very interesting. Yeah, I've only been in court once in my life, I believe, and I was about 16 years old. And me and my friend were racing our cars around town like 16-year-olds sometimes do, and we were going pretty fast and whatever, and no one was hurt. And about a week later, we got the police show up at both of our houses, and they said some old lady had called us in, and they with our license plates, and she said we were going pretty fast. Slave-on-slave action right there in action. And the ticket was quite big. It was like $500. This is like 1986. So that's like, $3,000 today, basically. And so I was sort of ambivalent about it. I didn't know the philosophy of anarchy, but I just knew I just didn't like anything to do with these governments. I knew I hadn't hurt anybody, and I didn't understand why I had to pay this, but I understood that if I didn't pay it, there'd probably be some consequences. And my friend talked me into going to court over it, and I just went along with it. I'd never even thought about going to court over things like this, and he actually hired a lawyer, and he hired a lawyer for like $1,000 for a $500 ticket. So right off the bat, he's $500 down no matter what happens, or $1,500 down probably. Or at least $1,000 down, actually. And so he went first with his lawyer, and the lawyer didn't do anything. It was hilarious. Like the guy just sat there and went, answered the questions like, yes, thank you, Your Honor, Your Highness, or whatever they say. And the judge goes, okay, guilty. And my friend was so shocked that the lawyer didn't do a thing. He started yelling at his lawyer, and they started yelling at the judge. He kind of like lost it, and he's like, F you, F all this. And the judge got really mad, and the judge goes, now I'm taking your license away for a year. And he hits his gavel down, and he hits his hammer on the desk, as if that means something magical or something.
It does to the Masons. It's a little Mason hammer.
Okay. And then my friend kept lipping off, and he goes, do you want 2 years? And my friend, I finally sort of grabbed my friend. I said, hey, just stop it. This is not going well. If you keep shouting, it's just not going to get better, I don't think, at this point. And so I got him out of there, and then he goes, okay, next on the docket, Jeff Berwick, please come forward. And I came forward, and he goes, how do you plead? I went, guilty. And I walked away. I paid the $500, and I'm like, I don't want to ever have to go through that again. That was ridiculous. It's obviously, there's, just to me, the whole concept of having these people who say that they have these laws that you somehow broke and no one was ever hurt, but now you owe them money. So I've just sort of gone through life mostly just not paying tickets or getting numerous different driver's licenses and using different ones in different countries I'm in that are not from that country so that they can't really go after me, things like that. But so I've been very lucky in that I've never been sued. I've never sued anyone. I just always try to stay away from the government legal system. I just always try to work things out privately with people. If we have a car accident, let's just work it out. What I have insurance. What do we owe you? We'll work it out amongst ourselves. So I've been lucky that way. But for you, it must be interesting to be in the court so much. You must see so much crazy sort of activity going on.
It is, and I guess we're about the same age, and I applaud you that you've stayed out of court this long. I mean, I mean, even before I became an activist, I was spending, you get tickets. Cops are douchebags. I mean, they've got a quota, and yes, anyone can look up. There have been whistleblowers, so they're not anti-cop. You see a lot of this stuff. I call it the psychopath circus because these people, and let me just preface it by saying I'm not just throwing it out as a pejorative. Okay, I'm not just making fun of somebody. People who have a callous disregard for others, who have massive egos, who lie without a hint of shame. That's your basic borderline personality, narcissist or antisocial, psycho. So I always do my best to say, well, this is why I'm calling him a psychopath. If he doesn't have, well, let's explain. Let's look at the data. What does the data tell you about the average cop or judge? The judge is willing to use deadly force to get you into that room. It's called a warrant, right? Whoa. You're telling me it's so important to get my butt in here, you're willing to have some men with guns kill me. And they always blame the victim, Jeff. What? Well, you just have to comply. So that's why my show, what we do is I say, oh, you filthy, it's like the blaming of the victim. Oh, you filthy slut, you shouldn't have worn that dress. Excuse me, you're excusing antisocial behavior. You're blaming the victim. And it's the same thing here. The fact is a traffic ticket is not so important that you would have to give a man a gun and say it's okay to kill this person to get him in here. And just the fact that... See, this gets into why it's so easy to show that they don't have a leg to stand on. And yeah, I'll be the first to admit that I'm so difficult to deal with in court because I object incessantly. I don't let them get away with anything. That sometimes it's just a matter of just all right, get them out of here. But we bring out all these through the objections, which I highly recommend. If anyone's doing things like Mark does, you're objecting to pretty much everything, and it's pointing out all these contradictions and inconsistencies in their language to you, because the judge will actually tell you, if you ask him, "Are you a fair, impartial, independent decision maker?" Yes. Could you? All right, there's like a contradiction that's making me crazy here. You need to explain to me, and I'll plead guilty when you do. You need to explain to me how it's possible for you to be fair, impartial, and independent while you're literally forcing me to answer this man's complaint. See, a lot of times people get, well, the conflict of interest is because the judge works for the state, which is true. But to me, it's always been more effective to bring out that he's forcing you to answer that complaint. Because who else is he doing it on behalf of? The prosecutor, I've had critics say, well, Mark, the prosecution couldn't prosecute their cases if the judge didn't do that. That's the system. Okay, he's still forcing me on behalf of the prosecutor, right? Okay, so where's the fair, impartial, independent decision maker? And that's the only, if you just stuck on that, it's not even remotely possible for them to explain. I had a hearing officer up in New Hampshire try to do that last year. He says, well, you have to have evidence of a conflict of interest. Where's your evidence? You just said you were acting on behalf of the commissioner. So it's that, and in fact, through their own system, Jeff, they can't, the judge, because he's forcing you to answer the prosecutor's complaint, cannot presume you innocent. There's no way.
That's interesting. I've never heard these angles on things. That's very interesting.
So that's one of the big differences between the Freeman types. I mean, I get into the evidence, I get into the facts, I look at how things really work, and I know that based on the evidence, what the data tells us, that there is no government, it's just a gang of men and women forcing us to pay them, that you can then exploit almost every single part of their proceedings and make it impossible for them to explain it. And the presumption of innocence is one of them, because the judge, just walking in the door or having the ticket, is automatically assuming for the prosecutor that the Constitution and laws of the state apply to you, right? He's willing to send men to kill you to get you in there because I have jurisdiction because my laws apply to you. Well, that's an element of the crime as well as jurisdiction. Because look at, we'll go to drugs again. Growing a field of poppy in my backyard is not inherently wrong. It's only wrong because the politician said so. So it only exists as a crime because of this, the law. So the law itself is an element of the charge because there's no charge without it. So how does a judge assume the jurisdiction that the laws apply to you and presume you innocent at the same time? Doesn't work out.
So when you say that, do they just say you're right and let you go?
Well, you and I, we're just discussing this between us.
Right.
So it's different when you engage them, and I always recommend that you do it in a Socratic method, a very scientific method. We're just, look, I'm trying to figure out how you're doing these things, and when you're done, I'm going to sign a plea of guilty. I'm going to go and I'll pay your fine. So it's a spirit of resolution. So I'm only asking questions. So I'll ask them, could you please explain to me how you can assume your laws apply and presume innocence at the same time? The burden should always be on them, not on you. So if you and I make a statement, we now have a burden to support that. And I don't want to do that. So I'm going to keep it, because you may be right. You may actually be right with whatever your position happens to be. They don't give a damn what you have to say. We've actually presented evidence as far as a CD with an IRS agent lying on the CD. The judge turned around and said, we didn't present any evidence and only conclusory statements.
Wow.
So it's better to keep the burden of proof always on them.
So have you been in front of like the same judge more than once who kind of sees you coming and is like, oh, God.
Yeah. So, there was one, Robin Allen. He, again, because it's jurisdiction's an element of the crime, and so the laws applying are an element. I got him. I thought I was going to give the guy a stroke. He got so mad at me. This is right here in Mesa. He's actually still there, and so I said to him, am I presumed innocent of the alleged crime? No. Well, yeah. Okay. And I always go in with like a notebook or something. I write it down so I can always recall back and feed that word. No, you said. I got to admit, I may come off as a jerk that way because I'll always bring back, no, you just said, I wrote it down. And so then I asked him, well, am I presumed innocent of every element of the crime? And that's when he lost it, Jeff. It's like, you're presumed innocent, move on, like, dude.
Wow.
I just want to plead guilty and go home, sir. You got to give me a straight answer, yes or no. He wouldn't do it. He wound up screaming at me. And so, because they were a bit familiar with me, they know that he recused himself so he didn't have to deal with me anymore.
Really?
Well, it was kind of a tactical thing because what I do is I bring up these issues of fact and they ignore it. Again, ignoring an issue of fact, that's really bad. See, look, these guys are good at spin. How do you spin ignoring a fact? Well, you didn't present it's right here, dude. It's right here. So it's easier for them to spin an issue of law. So they know that every time when they do that and I file a motion to change the judge, I know they're going to deny it because that's all they do. It's a reflexive deny. Well, that opens the door for a petition for special action, what they call here in Arizona, to get into the higher court and stop the trial. And it's easy to do that when they're ignoring issues of fact because they don't give a damn about the issues of law. Because you can look at the Supreme Court. There's 9 guys there. How many times have you ever seen or heard of a 9-0 decision? I've seen like 3. And I've been through a lot of them. So even those guys are disagreeing. There's always disagreements on points of law. Points of fact, not so much.
That's interesting. Why aren't there more defense lawyers using these sort of techniques?
Have you ever been to a defense lawyer's house?
I know what you mean by that, yeah. They do very well.
They do very well. They do very well. So people think that I charge a lot of money, and I believe, and people have called the show that I give a lot more use value for what people give me. I mean, somebody once paid me a couple $100, and they wound up, a $1,500 fine was dropped down to like $100. And other people were getting lawyers, and they were, so they did it themselves. So the use value is a whole lot more than they gave me, and I think that's why I don't have to advertise in this word of mouth. But attorneys charge 5, 6, 7 times the amount of money, and they want it's not just that. Give me $400 and I'll work for 4 hours for you. I mean, $400 I'll work for an hour. You have to give them. I've never seen a minimum of a $5,000 retainer. And that's on the low end. I mean, typically you're looking at, look, let's put this in context, okay? I helped somebody get a felony possession charge kicked out. He did it on his own, okay? I walked him through, cost him a couple $100, right? Now, the whole thing was tossed out. The prosecutor was absolutely livid, furious, but it got tossed out because he stuck to issues of fact. Now, imagine how much it would cost you to have the same thing done by an attorney. Felony possession, you're not walking out the door with less than $5,000. That it's just not going to happen. So the use value, which is something I learned a long time ago, give a lot more in use value than you actually take. And that's been a pretty good formula so far. So I think that's why. And attorneys, what? You're going to file a motion to dismiss. Let's say someone jumps your fence or whatnot, and they slip on your pool water, and what's the natural thing to do is they sue. And so I said, someone said to me, why doesn't an attorney just do like you do and file a motion to dismiss? Because there's no injury, the legal injury, which is the violation of a legal right, and then damage. There's damage because he slipped and fell, but the homeowner did not violate any legal right, so there's no cause of action. I said, well, Mark, why don't they just file a motion to dismiss like that? Well, how much are you going to charge for that, Jeff? Now, my person, but you're gonna maybe even if it was $1,000 for a 2-page document, it will get the job done. But even at $1,000 for 2 pages that your paralegal wrote, that you didn't, you paid him $100. I look at it this way. This is way from knowing attorneys. If you were a potential client, I'm not looking at you as an acquittal. I'm looking at you as my next boat. and the attorney's mindset is get as much money as possible from them. I mean, I'm sure you know lawyers, and that seems to be the mindset, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's quite a nefarious group of people, in my opinion. I try to stay away from them as much as possible. It's caused me problems, though, too, because I try not to do anything with legal contracts, which are legal, that will be adjudicated by a government court or anything. I just try to do almost everything I do by handshake. But that also opens me up to some problems. So I've been rethinking how I'm going to do business in the future. Because of that, perhaps private court, we would agree to go to a private court or something like that. It gets hard because you have to deal with the government systems all at the same time. It'd be so much better if there wasn't, obviously. Yeah, it's so fascinating to me, all this stuff. And the reason so people know that I got in contact with Marc was on the Anarchast interview with Lynn Ulbricht, the mother of Ross Ulbricht. We were talking about how the legal system really works against you and all the things they do. And I actually said that I saw a video with, I said Marc Stevens doing this one thing where they hadn't provided any evidence or anything from the government so that this person could defend themselves until like the night before the trial. But I actually got it wrong. It was actually Mark Victor who had done that. And I wasn't even sure how I knew Marc Stevens, but I must have knew him because I mentioned his name. And then within a couple of days, a few people started talking to me about Marc Stevens, and then I got in contact with him. So for some reason, we were sort of like gravitating towards each other in terms of thought. And then you mentioned that you also commented on what had happened in that case. So is that stuff that you also see all the time, is how they use all kinds of really backhanded ways to make it so you can't defend yourself?
Oh, yeah. What Marc was talking about is called a Brady violation in general, and that's after a U.S. Supreme Court case. And I had spoken on my show a number of times so that people know, and when people get a script or a motion template from me, I automatically send them a Brady request, which is asking for the prosecutor's inculpatory and exculpatory. They have to give you all the evidence, good and the evidence that, especially the evidence that tends to show that you're innocent. Impeachment type stuff, if the police officer is a known liar or the witnesses are not credible, all that's got to be given to you. And so what Marc was talking about was described recently by a panel at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and that's the western part of the United States. It includes Arizona. That Brady violations were at an epidemic level, and that only judges could say. So it's something that they're very well aware of. And let me just to put this in some context for those who don't waste their days going through all this legal stuff, because you have lives, which I understand. For a panel of the Ninth Circuit to come out and say that it is at epidemic levels and give you a laundry list of recent court cases bringing out, it's bad. In fact, it's like shadow stats, right? What they tell you publicly is just usually the tip of the iceberg of what's really happening. So I can say from personal experience, every single time we have put in for discovery, they have refused to comply with the discovery requirements. I'm working with someone now, which is what I thought you may have been talking about, where the prosecutor is saying he does not have to give any discovery at all, not even a witness list, until the day of trial. It's like, wait a minute, you've got $1 million budget. You've got a team of not only attorneys, professional litigators, but for every attorney, 5 paralegals and investigators? And you're coming after this one guy, and you're not going to give him the evidence till the day of. And it's U.S. versus Olson, and I recommend it's on my website. I got it linked. They go through in one case where they talk about all the excuses these scumbag prosecutors use. I shouldn't say scumbag, but all these things that the prosecutors use as an excuse, and the U.S. Supreme Court knocks everyone down. They're all lying, and the judges let them get away with it. It's really unfortunate, but it's something that you have to tell the jury, even if it's going to tick off the judge.
Interesting. Yeah, all this stuff is fascinating. I'm just trying to think of how useful all this information is. I'm surprised more people don't know about it. But it sounds like, according to what you're saying, that people do know about it. It's in every state and every province in Canada. People are using these techniques. So was this stuff that you outlined in your first book, or is this part of the second book, or?
Most of it's in the second book. I didn't do as much in the first book. The first book I wrote, and it was released in January 2003. I had not at the time had, well, my gosh, between the two books is 10 years of experience. So, you kind of refine things. I used to say to kind of introduce people to anarchist thought, because everything I'm doing in the court is from an anarchist standpoint, that the people doing this are not special. They're not government. They're just people. And it changes your whole outlook. Like, just look at them as a private company, and it will all start to make sense to you what they're doing and just how truly violent these people are. And so I used to say, should a service or product be provided at the barrel of a gun? And it's, well, no. And well, isn't government just men and women providing services at the barrel of a gun? And that would start to get the things moving. And so I've kind of simplified things as I've gone along the way, and looking and talking to, because I have if you go to the website, I basically have a federal magistrate who Mark Victor knows very well. He's known him quite, this is my first time talking with him, but Mark and Ernie know him very well. John Buttrick, he's a libertarian federal magistrate in Phoenix. And I'm admitting that the application of the federal law is arbitrary. And so but from talking with more intelligent people like John Buttrick, you start to realize there are certain things when you ask the questions that's going to give them an opportunity to dodge it. And so now I just lay it right there on the line. Look, it's hilarious. You got to hear some of the comments that I get from these prosecutors and judges when I ask this question. If I was to force people to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? I can't. And so that's kind of the evolution. I don't know if I can make it any easier to really introduce people to anarchist kind of thought and to start questioning these contradictions in your own head. Because they'll say, of course you're a criminal. What is the difference then between me and people called the government? Don't they just force us to give them money? And that starts the thought process. And that's why so many people, I think, have been able to take the information and go into court. It's so easy to understand that they realize, I've been an anarchist my entire life. I can now resolve this contradiction. These people are criminals. They're no different than me. The only difference is I'm more consistent with the non-aggression principle.
It's amazing. The one video I saw with Marc Victor was an actual video from inside the courtroom. Do you have any instances of when you've been inside a courtroom and said these things that are on video?
I don't have. The only video I have was from, that I can think of offhand, was from, I helped Ian Freeman of Free Talk Live, and I was on video, and he was in New Hampshire. And even though it wasn't an actual, let's say, a literal court, it was still a hearing, and the same issues that I would raise in court, I raised there. So that's on video. I have audio of other hearings where I've done this, and so those are available. I've even confronted a few city council members and on HD video, which is really cool. So I had the guy in Tempe, because here in front of a whole room full of people, they're insisting their laws apply to me because I'm physically in Arizona. And so I'm pressing them to answer my question. This is the second time I had been in front of them, and then nobody would answer. So finally, the lawyer of the bunch couldn't take it anymore. And just like in anger, he says, his name was Colby Granville. And he says, you want evidence that the laws apply? Here you go. The laws apply because, no, we have jurisdiction because we said so. And so I turned to a friend of mine who's actually filming. I said, did you get that? Yeah, we got it. The sad thing is, I have it on HD video, a politician saying, we have jurisdiction because we said so. I couldn't get any of the mainstream media here in Phoenix to pick it up. No,
they would never do that. But we can get that out there through the internet. So when we finish this up, please give us links to your books, your radio show, your website, which has some of these things on it. We definitely want to know all about all that stuff. It's fascinating. I presume that you would never defend someone in this fashion if there was a victim and that you believe that person actually did commit a crime that had a victim. Is that correct?
Most of the time, yes. Yeah. If I believe that the person is honestly being set up,
Right, that's different.
And so I did help somebody with that. We kind of had a parting of the ways, but I believe from the last I saw posted that it was eventually thrown out. It didn't involve physical harm.
Okay.
It stopped short of physical harm. So I guess it was your classic assault, where it was just threats, alleged threats. But if it was murder or something like that, rape, if the evidence is there, then I'm not willing to help there.
Yeah, great. Okay, this is awesome. I had no idea about all this stuff. This is fascinating, and for all the anarchists out there, you gotta get educated on this stuff because we're always getting arrested for something just because of the way we are. Generally, we just like Mark said, he didn't have his vehicle identification number because he didn't see any reason why he should or had to have that, and many anarchists are the same, and we always end up in handcuffs for something, usually completely. I've been in handcuffs a few times, by the way, in the U.S. The only time in the U.S., every time in the U.S. And one was actually in Phoenix. I was down at the where the hockey rink is there, the hockey arena, and there was a conference. And, there's all those bars in that area, and it was the night before the conference, and, all the bars are all connected. They're all in this little courtyard. And most places in the world I go, you can leave from one bar and go to the next with, like, your bottle of beer. Apparently not in the police state of Phoenix. I was surrounded by, like, 3 squad cars almost instantly, handcuffed, and they were doing, but I actually know how to talk to cops pretty good. I guess I'm sort of similar to you in that way, and I know how to talk to them, and I don't go so deeply into philosophy too much, but I first say, well, who's the criminal here? I didn't attack you. Did I attack anyone else? I've been attacked. I've been kidnapped here. I'm in your car. I don't want to be here. They don't usually listen too much to that, but then I'll say something like, well, I'd like to call my lawyer, and that usually kind of irritates them because they're like, oh, great, now we have to deal with all that. And then in that case, I said, I'm here speaking at this conference. I'm one of the top speakers, a big financial writer. I'm a journalist. And that also kind of makes them go, oh, maybe this is too much trouble than it's worth because he might write about it and that sort of thing. And in both cases, they just let me go. Once, actually, it was in Palm Springs. I also got surrounded by 5 squad cars because I was walking down the street at night, and it looked like I was drunk. I was drunk, but I didn't know that was terribly illegal. I was definitely buzzed. I had a few drinks, and I was walking down to another bar. And the same thing happened. I said all the same things, and he eventually just, in handcuffs, dropped me back off at my hotel. So there are ways to deal with these things, and so that's more of the police side. And, of course, we've been talking a lot lately about using cameras. Right. They really don't like that. And these new apps coming out, like Sidekick, which might come out, where you can actually have a lawyer on your cell phone as soon as you get pulled over, in video streaming. So a lot of these things help, and then the things you're doing in courts are amazing. So I don't know if you have any other stories. Your stories are amazing. If not, finish off and let us know where people can get more information.
Well, there's a lot. There is a lot. I won't go through a lot of that. A lot of the details are in the book, Government Indicted, and things are not very surprising in court. They follow the same stupid script. And I realized it was kind of onto something years ago because I have these scripts for court, which I don't recommend you just read, but you get the process. It's basically learning to engage somebody in asking questions and not taking the burden and only accepting a responsive answer. And so somebody who had the script, and he went to court somewhere, which I had never been. I'm a little more well-traveled now, but not back in 2003. And they said, how the hell did you do this? Why? He says, the judge said almost exactly what you said he was going to say. How did you predict that? It's the same. It's the same scam. It's the same thing. And what I would say, to check out, the links on markstevens.net and the call of shames when I'm confronting tax agents, when I'm confronting politicians, the guys who are doing the attacking. So we as anarchists, we tend to get a lot of criticism from from a philosophical side where they disagree, and I don't have much time for that. I'm showing that we're going to the people who are actually attacking you. So as anarchists who we see as the problem, those initiating force, I'm going right to the source. And so the people who are doing the actual attacks have no evidence. It may sound crazy, but there's the objective proof. You know, let the data speak no matter what it says. If the data shows that they don't have a leg to stand on, you know, that's, so I think as anarchists, and you're right, we're going to, there's going to be times we're going to go to, you know, be arrested, or we're going to be, you know, charged with something. And I think that, and well, I know that when people can see things like that, they can hear examples like that, and then have a little community that we have, like on my Skype chat, where there's always people available, well, 3 continents, like I said, that are always available to help get us prepped for court and do role playing and naturally engaging. That they can see that there's a lot of what's the word? Well, there's people are not as stressed out about going to court because they've seen and heard where I've done it and others have done it. Like, oh, these guys don't have a leg to stand on. So they're more confident going into court and challenging them. And a lot of people told me, even if they didn't have the ticket or whatnot thrown out, they went in, they kicked the snot out of the prosecutor, the cop, the judge, or whatnot, they still had to appeal it, okay, or maybe just pay it to walk away. They felt that they were better prepared, that if there was a more serious attack, that they could go ahead and do that. So I don't recommend just getting tickets. So something, you know, I do have a program for that, but I also recommend people, especially as anarchists, going and engaging them either on the phone or at their city council meetings. Point out the gun in the room. Don't let make their job be easy at all. You know, I know there was a situation, because I've seen you at Libertopia a number of times, and there was a situation where you handled it very gracefully, because you just reminded, because you started smoking again. Someone didn't like that you were smoking.
All right.
And even though they were very aggressive with you, and you probably would have been justified in maybe getting a little, you know, perturbed also, you handled it very gracefully. But I encourage us as people as anarchists, because I think that part of what we're doing to bring people to realize that they have these contradictory ideas in their head is to publicly confront the attackers, collaterally attack their concepts to get the people in the audience thinking. It's like I had to say to the ones in Tempe and Scottsdale, you're not my audience. I'm not trying to convince you to be an anarchist. It's your audience, it's your victims. I recommend and I encourage them not to comply with you. That's what we're doing. You're digging your own hole by not answering. So I encourage, please, it's very simple. You just have to confront them on this one question and follow up. If I did business like you guys and I forced people to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? and like I mentioned before, Jeff, and I'll be quick, the only thing they can come out and say is, we have the law. And I've got enough on the website, and then you could actually go, well, do you have any actual proof that your laws apply to me just because I'm physically in Arizona? And then there goes that.
I love it. I actually just remember there was one more time I was in handcuffs. It was in St. Kitts. And I got sort of framed on having there was some cocaine in a bar, and it was on the ground, and they said it was mine, and they tried to rough me up. And you know, what I've sort of discovered through all of my interactions with police, whether it be in the U.S. or around the world, is I just keep very calm, and I just say logical and rational things. Like, you're saying that I'm the criminal here, but who is the victim? And then they'll be like, well, you broke the law. And I'll be like, well, there's only been one act of aggression here so far. I'll be in handcuffs, just, you know, calmly talking about it. And you know, they don't like it, but they kind of sort of sense that maybe he sort of does have a point. And I actually ended up in the police station. I'm just sitting there chatting with the police chief. By the end of it, he's like, oh yeah, we're so sorry about this. You know, you're totally right. You're the victim here. And by the end of it, I got a presidential pardon and left the country. So yeah, you can do these kind of things. It's all about always keep calm and be rational and logical. And like you said, you don't have to go all crazy and shouting or anything. That actually lessens our point, because our point is just, let's just talk facts here. Where is this law that says that I agreed that I was not going to go over this speed limit? Did I sign a contract? You know, if it was a private road, and if they said, you know, if I had to sign a contract or whatever to use the road, and they said on the road you can't go over this amount, or we're going to charge you extra money, I'd be fine with that. I agreed to that, but I did not agree to this particular thing. And so, yeah, it can be very, very interesting. And I really suggest to people, especially anarchists, to look more and more into these things, especially what Marc's doing. That's great. I'd love to hear this just catching on and more people doing this and just turning it on the courts every single time and not bowing down to them and not taking whatever they want to give you. And Marc has shown it actually works. So that's fantastic. And so, yeah, please let us know all your books, websites, any other information you want to let us know.
Thanks. I appreciate that, Jeff. And I appreciate the opportunity to be on. Well, it's markstevens.net. It's all there. We got the books available there. And, you know, the radio show is every Saturday from 4 to 7 Eastern Standard Time on the Liberty Radio Network, LRN.FM, which, of course, is run by Ian Freeman of Free Talk Live. And, you know, as with anything, you know, if someone's a skeptic, they're more than welcome. I've invited some so-called super lawyers who have trashed me incessantly, and like they're borderline obsessed, and I've invited them to come on the show, and I said, I'll even go this far. You assemble a panel of your best experts, your best, and I'll go 5 to 1, 10 to 1. I don't care how big a panel you get. If you think you've got evidence proving any of these laws apply to anybody, bring it. We've got a $5,000 challenge that no one's taken us up on yet.
Yeah, those challenges are interesting because, you know, like, who was it? Bob Murphy did a challenge and raised money. I think it's like over hundreds of thousands of dollars now to debate Paul Krugman, who's just a total statist, Keynesian idiot, and he won't accept. So it really goes to show who is right and who is wrong in many of these cases. You're actually offering them money to prove you wrong, and they won't do it because they can't do it.
Right, he's publicly trashed me, this one guy, and so someone brought up a good idea of kind of doing a crowdsourcing kind of thing. Like, what we'll do is do a crowdsource for a charity of his choice to do a 3-hour broadcast with me, with a panel. And it's easy to sit behind a computer, you know, in your basement or your mom's house, right, and type up all these horrible, vicious things about people, but to confront them, and I hope that people see, and I don't want someone to say, just take my word for it. I lay out the evidence. Just make up your mind based on the facts presented and what he's got, make up your mind. And so I think the facts show that, in addition to that he's lying, it shows a lot that his credibility, that he will not confront anybody publicly.
Yep.
That to me, that says a lot. And so if anyone does disagree with what I presented, if you think that there is evidence proving the Constitution, the laws of, let's say, Arizona or wherever apply to me just because my physical location, I'm more than happy to do a show and ambush me on a live broadcast. I have no problem with that. I've been ambushed a number of times, and that's the thing is anarchists, we're anarchists because we are rational. And a lot of people, and I've seen the show, I love it, Jeff, with Bill Buford. That was great. It was just too short, the one from Libertopia.
Yeah, we should do another one.
It's just we're anarchists for a reason. We're rational. We all got to a point where we could not resolve the conflicts in our head that it's wrong for me to lie, steal, kill, and cheat people, but it's okay for people called government. It's just...
Yeah, at its basis, it just makes no sense. But people have been brainwashed, and so we just have to keep pointing out the rationality of what they're doing, and eventually the truth will come to light more and more as more people realize it. It's just a matter of gaining a certain amount of percent of people who understand these sort of things. So when there's a cocktail party, let's say there's 20 people there, if at least 2 of those people in every cocktail party in the world understand what we're talking about, they can greatly sway the entire conversation and wake people up very quickly. There'll be people who are angry. Like you said, that's how you know you're winning a debate, is when a person gets angry. I've never gotten angry in a debate. Because I know exactly what I'm saying is true and it's rational. They might be saying a bunch of garbage, and I'll just reply to it and say, no, that's incorrect because of this. And then they'll usually start to get all angry or storm off, and they lose. That's how debates work. If you can't rationally talk and use evidence to make your point and not be refuted in it, then and you get so angry you have to leave, you just lost that debate. So
and you lost any kind of credibility and respect that I might have for which is, I think, important. And that's it. If you have the facts to support your argument, present it. And that's just all I do. So when the argument is, that if you're physically in Arizona or wherever, then the laws apply to you. That's the argument. Got it. Now, why is that true? Where's your evidence to support that? And that's all it comes down to. If you have the evidence to support your argument, if you can actually show the proof why your argument is valid, let's hear it. Unlike this guy with the Maricopa County Maricopa County Attorney's Office, I have this on the website, so it's the last article I did. I thoroughly refuted this garbage from him. He actually, after speaking to me, that's what gets me, Jeff. After speaking to me, he still laid out the logical fallacies. And so the biggest one is it's right on the website. It says each inmate is evidence that the laws apply to you and everyone else in Arizona.
Yeah, you've been kidnapped with a bunch of other people, so that alone proves that we have the right to kidnap you.
Yeah,
because look, we've done it before.
Right. So I said, so I photoshopped this thing, and it says, okay, so your argument, your support for your argument that the Constitution and laws apply to me because I'm physically in Arizona is this: our laws apply to you because we put other people in prison. Oh. So I had already pointed out to him on the phone, you can't get too smart with these people, because I said, that's called argumentum ad baculum there, Jerry. You're appealing to consequences or the stick. Your argument's right because you put other people in prison? Wow. That's why it goes down to, what was the quote? I keep 6 honest men with me at all times. They taught me everything I know. Who, what, where, when, why, and how. And unfortunately, the majority of people have not done that, but we as anarchists have I believe it's a part of our job as activists and to bring that out and get people to start questioning those things so that they can realize that there are contradictory ideas in their head, and some of them are pretty bad.
Yeah, very bad. A lot of people have been killed and murdered and raped because of these ideas, and yeah, it's really amazing. And it's also funny at the same time that what we're really trying to do is help people. We're trying to show them or help them to see that this system they're in is wrong and that it's hurting a lot of people, and including themselves. And they get angry at us. It's that old get angry at the messenger sort of thing. Like, how dare you try to help me? You're crazy for trying to help people this way. It's crazy. Anyway, we'll see what happens. It's interesting, all this kind of stuff, all these people doing things like yourself everywhere, all over now. I think it's getting a lot of momentum. So just keep it up, share these videos, subscribe to this channel, check out Marc's stuff. Definitely, I'm going to check it out. A lot of the stuff that he mentioned in this broadcast, I'm going to check out right after because it sounds fascinating. I wasn't aware of it. So I'd like to thank Marc a lot. And I actually go up to Phoenix every now and then. My dad is a Canadian snowbird who has a place in Mesa, so maybe we can meet the next time I'm up there. And yeah, or if not, come on down to Acapulco, February 27th to March 1st. Going to be a lot of anarchists down here talking about this kind of stuff and having fun and not getting arrested for many of the things you would get arrested for in the U.S. Because they just don't do that down here. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
This is Anarchast.